Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to the Cook County Bar Association live on CAN TV. My name is Leonore Carlson, and I am your host this evening. Tonight, our guest is Todd Belcourt, attorney, law professor, and executive director of Social Change, and we will be discussing the status of criminal justice reform in Illinois. If you have any questions this evening, please feel free to call us at the number that you see on your screen, 312-738-1060. As you may or may not know, the Cook County Bar Association is the oldest association of African American lawyers and judges in the United States. We take this time every week to bring you special guests to discuss legal topics and provide you with helpful legal information. Although I am an attorney, I do not represent your interests. If you need an attorney or legal assistance, then please give us a call at the CCBA. The number there is 312-630-1157. Or you can also visit us at our website at www.thecookcountybar.org. Before we begin our discussion, we must inform you that the opinions and views expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions and views of the Cook County Bar Association, its board members, its officers, its members, or sponsors. And with that, I would like to turn this over to Todd Belcourt. Todd, can you tell us a little more about your work?
I guess this wouldn't be a program ran by lawyers if it didn't have two disclaimers before we even got started, huh? Yes, my name is Todd Belcourt. It's an honor and privilege to speak with you all briefly a little bit today. I do a few things, one of which is teach. I teach as a lecturer in law at the University of Chicago Law School, teaching a class called The New Jim Crow, which teaches law students about policy advocacy and really the reinvention of slavery using legislation. I also have my own nonprofit called Social Change, in which we engage in advocacy to really transform individual lives, communities, but also systems by empowering individuals, teaching them about their rights, providing them with legal assistance, giving them the sort of step-by-step nuts and bolts approach to help themselves in a pro se context, but also helping individuals and organizations build their capacity to advocate successfully to change the necessary things within our legislature so that we can have the reforms we need to make sure everyone has access to jobs and justice.
So what made you decide to do this line of work?
That's an interesting question. I think at the end of the day, I grew up with my single mother, three siblings, including myself, and my brother is paraplegic. So coming up, we knew enough about hardship and a lot about discrimination, entire systems being created to make it almost impossible for my brother to navigate the world. And how difficult it was just not having much money in and of ourselves with our family to be able to get from point A to point B or to get the education that we wanted. So fortunately, we had our mother who fought hard for us to have certain opportunities and to be in a position so we can get education and get access to really some of the elite opportunities that gave me an opportunity to be a lawyer. So then understanding that, how could I then turn around and once I got the education she fought for, not make sure other people got access to the same opportunities. So that's really what social change is about, making sure that people do get access to opportunities and using whatever opportunities I've been afforded to pass that sort of knowledge and education on to others so that they can maximize their ability to fulfill their potential.
What would you say is the state of justice reform, both locally and nationally now?
You know, this is an interesting topic. When you have a Trump presidency, a lot of things are clouded because people are really more partisan than even usual. But at the end of the day, you have to consider criminal justice is really one of the few instances where folks from all political beliefs are really alignment on a lot of things, whether it be libertarians, whether it be Tea Party folks, whether it be progressives, whether it be Green Party, or whatever it may be. And the beauty of that is if you can cobble together these really unlikely partnerships in terms of most other areas of the legislature or legislation, you can really get some progress. And in Illinois, this is a perfect example of that. Illinois is actually as representative of the entire country as almost any state. We have folks who are rural, we have folks who are from suburban areas and folks from the city. And you have different regions that have different needs. So anytime you're in a position to get all those folks on the same page or enough to move this justice system forward, it's something that's really significant. And I think they've done that as it relates to things like sealing and expungement, which people may be familiar with, but also in terms of making sure that people aren't being unlawfully discriminated against simply because of past mistakes. And that's something that was done when they banned the box for private and public employers a couple of years ago and a few years prior.
Can you tell us a little more about the efforts that Social Change is making, your nonprofit is making in Illinois right now?
Yeah. I'm just coming from Springfield. I was lucky enough to catch the train over. And there's a few things we're working on, two of which haven't been voted on, but let's start with the ones that have. Three different reforms within the actual prison system themselves. While we're trying to make sure that the people who are actually sent to prison are only people who are the most dangerous for our society, reserving prison as an extreme remedy to the crime that we have in our communities. We're trying to make sure that people who are in prison are also getting the training and the other opportunities they need to better themselves, to maintain their social bonds with their families, to be in a position to get further skills and be more marketable upon release. So we've done that through three different bills. HB 2738, which was to allow video visitation within prisons in a cost-controlled way, so people can continue to maintain contact with their family and loved ones. So people don't have to go through the extreme inconvenience of traveling 3, sometimes 6 hours round trip to visit family members who are incarcerated, but also to provide entrepreneurship education and also tablets, just like iPads that have educational material and personal development material only on them, so people can at all times be in a position to continue to better themselves. The goal being that upon release, not only will people be able to maintain the familial contacts, but they'll be in a better position to get the jobs and opportunities that they may have been denied prior to being imprisoned in the first place.
Can you tell us a little more about the legislation you're working on with regards to sentencing?
Yeah, sentencing, as you know, we've been taking the war. We had the war on drugs currently in place, and as all sorts of evidence has shown over the last 40 years, that's the wrong approach to dealing with a public health issue. So instead of locking people up or putting people in prison over drug use or some other similar issue that may not necessarily relate to violence, why don't we provide more mechanisms to give judges more discretion, to give people sentences that are more suitable given the actual conduct. So one of the bills we were advocating for forcefully related to that, and it got bipartisan sponsorship, and it's wavering in the House currently, but that's what it would do: create a safety valve to expressly use for judges to use to avoid these extreme unintended consequences of throwing people in prison for significant periods of time. If there's some better way to actually remediate and get to the bottom of the actual conduct responsible for them being arrested in the first place. And there's
Again, if you are watching just now, tuning in, this is the Cook County Bar Association live hotline show. We are taking open calls from the community about all things legal. I am your host, Leonora Carlson, and our guest today is Todd Belcourt. Please call in and join us for our discussion by dialing the number that you see on your screen at 312-738-1060. So, Todd, I would like to go back to some of the things that you discussed about the services that are currently in place for those who are imprisoned. What is the state currently right now?
Well, when you consider the issues we're having with the budget, that affects every aspect of service provision in the state, including the prevalence of very critical services like GED services, what have you, within the correction system. So that's something to always be aware of, and that's why it's important. That's why we're advocating for solutions, recognizing this issue, that allow for third parties to come in and provide some of the resources that our men and women who are behind bars may need. So yes, that's something we've accounted for. That's something that is an issue, providing the resources necessary to actually have the guard staffing and the teachers and all that, so people can get access to the GED and other educational opportunities available. But that's something we're trying to actually be able to supplement and enhance by bringing outside resources and organizations and grant opportunities, so people can get to the heart of some of these issues that are responsible for the behavior in the first place.
And what efforts have been made with regards to when someone leaves prison? What resources do they have when they get out?
There's a lot of organizations that are expressly formed to provide services to individuals who are released and reentering of society. The Safer Foundation is a pretty well-known one. Goodwill Industries is a known one as well. And one of the things that people may not know is upon completion of their sentence, that they are able to get further certification or better themselves by getting some sort of skill that they can document, that actually allows them to waive what's called a waiting period for the sealing remedy. And sealing is a way you can petition the courts to limit who can look at old records to law enforcement and other entities that are determined to need access to those records by law, by the General Assembly. So it's important for people to recognize there are immediate remedies for people who depart prison if they are able to get access to some of these educational opportunities, and that's another reason why we're trying to increase the number of opportunities available to people. So not only can they better themselves, but upon release, upon completion of their sentence and paying their debt to society, they'll be in a better position to get the jobs they need to take care of themselves and their families as well.
And what efforts have been made with regards to, what is social change working on with regards to how the community interacts with law enforcement prior to them even getting arrested?
That's right. Police and community relations is one of the most significant things going on in our communities, particularly in Chicago, where it's ground zero, where the Department of Justice just finished an investigation, and they found that there's civil rights violations that were taking place. In that instance, it's really important to not ostracize the community or the police, or just to rail against one another, to actually bring them together and put them in a position to hear each other out, understand the difficulties that both are enduring, and try to better figure out how we can navigate a system so community policing, community first approaches, preserving life, all these things that we all agree are necessities, are what's reflected in policy and practice. So that's what we've done by attending sessions, convening sessions, being in a position to moderate between both entities, but also trying to make sure all the conversations and solutions that come to bear from those conversations throughout the city are actually reflected in law. And that's what we've been advocating for, not just in Illinois, but also in other states. And we were able to get things done in St. Louis that reflects some of the priorities that they brought to bear there as a result of the conversations between police and community members.
So what type of legislation have you been working on?
That's right, at least 5 different pieces. One in particular is allowing law enforcement to have affirmative protections when they want to be in a position to say one of their colleagues is acting improperly. And that's something that we've been working on, providing that protection for our law enforcement brothers and sisters when that's the case. And that's something that is now a law in St. Louis. It's a work in progress here in Illinois. Making sure that law enforcement, when they do misrepresent something in a police report, that they're held accountable. I think that's something that was very clear that happened in the Laquan McDonald case. And that's something we need to make sure that if we're going to maintain the integrity and restore the trust between community and police, folks need to be understanding that if police do misrepresent something that happened on the scene, they can be held accountable. Also making sure that records are available for a longer period of time. Police misconduct records are something that within court proceedings can be difficult to get as it is, and if there's a time cap on when people can access them, then you can see there's an incentive then to try to push the court dates further and further until they're no longer accessible. Making sure that's not the case either, so people can still get access to these critical records to hold folks accountable. Because police officers, there's so much misconduct that we see being broadcast that actually makes us forget that they're heroes who are protecting our communities. So it's important to provide police avenues to root out their own, but also community avenues to make sure that police are held accountable.
So what does that look like when you say to be held accountable? What specific policies have been implemented or being worked on?
That's right. It's a long conversation. It's a 5-month negotiation about what exactly the level of penalties are that will be provided, but also how this can be done statewide. But certainly the city of Chicago has already taken some steps towards this with their civilian oversight police authority to make sure that there is some accountability on a local spectrum. But at the same time, there hasn't been anything done on a whole state basis. So we're working, every county has their own approach to law enforcement. We're trying to bring some uniformity, at least guaranteeing that people have some use of force statute, so people are very clear on the policies and practice in which they're allowed to use lethal force. Also making sure it's very clear there's some sort of very strong and robust mechanism and independent mechanism to consider instances where there are complaints against police and to hold them accountable.
So you teach a very interesting class called The New Jim Crow. Can you tell the audience a little more about what this class is about and what at the University of Chicago Law School?
Yeah. At the end of the day, legislation, Dr. King said, the law can't make a man love me, but it can keep him from lynching me, which is pretty important. And all that's really trying to unpack the notion that law doesn't necessarily change sentiments, but it can change behavior. And it's important for people to recognize the way in which behavior has been controlled via legislation for certain populations since this country's formation. Really, the seeds and truths that birth this country are things like, it's all men are created equal. We all have inalienable rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We pledge allegiance to things like liberty and justice for all. We have a statute that welcomes people that says, bring me your tire, you're poor. But at the same time, there's a lot of actions and a lot of actual laws on the books that run counter to those very significant truths.
Can you give an example of what type of laws run counter to founding principles?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as we get further away from principles like requiring mens rea and actus reus, meaning so we don't even require a guilty intent in some instances to arrest people and to hold them accountable for a crime. In fact, there was a bill that was just argued on the floor in the General Assembly, Illinois General Assembly yesterday, SB 1722. And what that bill would do is then ratchet up the penalties for individuals, at least require the court to presume a ratcheting up of penalties for people who simply possess a gun. Not with an intent to hurt anybody, not with any sort of declared or even demonstrated intent to do anything that would be considered criminal, but simply possessing in and of itself that act can yield significant prison time. And I think as we get further away from the very bedrock principles of the criminal justice system, putting people in a position where if they can't afford to bail out, then they're functionally in prison even though they're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. These are the sorts of things that undercut the principles that are really supposed to be the guiding ones of our criminal justice system, things we're fighting against at social change.
If you are now just tuning in, this is the Cook County Bar Association live hotline show, and we are taking open calls from the community. My name is Leonore Carlson, and I am your host, and I'm here with Todd Belcour, and we are discussing the status of criminal justice reform in Illinois. Please call in and join us in our discussion by dialing the number that you see on your screen, 312-738-1060.
And I'm glad you read that number because I can't quite see it. So it is it's 312 something for sure.
312-738-1060. So Todd, tell us more about how can the community get involved in the work that you do or in your nonprofit? What can we do as individual citizens?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to be engaged with the folks that you're essentially employing, and that's your elected official. The elected officials in our communities, our districts, our wards are our employee. They're the people we vote on, decide when to fire or hire. So it's important to hold them accountable. A lot of times there's so much information thrown at them. I mean, there's over 6,000 bills, for example, in the House of the Illinois General Assembly. That's a lot of information to try to take in. So it's important to remind individuals who are representing us what's important, why it's important to fight for a particular piece of legislation, what particular things are important to our communities. And that's what I would ask in terms of social change, whether you go to our website, chicagosocialchange.org, and sign up for updates on what we're working on, or so you can be included in some of our grassroots activism to notify certain legislators. But I think the most important thing is to build a relationship with your actual legislator. Figure out who it is, your alderwoman, your alderman, your congressman, congresswoman, your state rep, Illinois senator, so people, you can actually hold them accountable and figure out the pushes and pulls that get them to do what we need. And at the end of the day, lobbyists for other interests are in their face every day. And if we're not in a position where we're not at the table or our concerns are at the tip of their mind, and then it's easy for them to be inundated with information, maybe make a decision that may be counter to our interests. So stay with them, get to know them better, and stay on them.
And how would you get involved in your nonprofit?
Yeah, I think going to our website, chicagosocialchange.org. I don't want to make this kind of publicizing what we're doing and getting people to just focus on us. But yeah, there's a place where you can sign up for updates. You can run social media through Chicago International Social Change Film Festival. We have a film festival also. If you like film, want to be involved and help us screen them. If you want to help us in putting together our community programming, one of the things we do is go to different communities and provide Know Your Rights seminars and making sure people are treated properly by employers when seeking employment. We provide seminars on the legal remedies that impact folks who have criminal records, if you want to help administer those and learn about those remedies. The idea being we want everyone to know everything that we know, everything as lawyers or practitioners, so they're empowered in a position to exercise their rights and help other people do the same. And certainly we need more folks. We always, as a nonprofit, if folks are looking for an organization to donate to, certainly we're one. But more than anything, the way to really change the system is to make sure that you don't get further away from it, but you get closer to it. You lean into the frustration of the political system and begin navigating it by engaging with your elected officials and being in a better position to influence them by constantly being around them.
Is there anything before we go that you really want the people to know?
Yeah, I think when you relate to things like sealing, expungement, it's important to recognize we go down there, and many other organizations go down there every year to make sure there's more doors of opportunity available to folks in our communities. Folks of all backgrounds, folks from whether it be as far the tip, further southern tip of Illinois to the further northest point. So be engaged not just with your legislators, but also make sure you're paying attention on social media to the different remedies that be made available. I know at one point we had a seminar and someone said, well, you can't do anything to get rid of a conviction from my record. But that's no longer true. Now sealing is a remedy available that can limit convictions, not just non-convictions, from people's record. So it's important for people to recognize that there are remedies that are changing because we are advocating actively to make sure that there are further barriers that people have to experience to get in a position to take care of themselves and their families. And now nearly all nonviolent lower level felonies and misdemeanors are eligible for sealing. And that's thanks to an effort by a large coalition of individuals who just got a bill passed today to further expand those remedies. And this was a bipartisan effort. So stay in tuned. Definitely go to ChicagoSocialChange.org. We'll keep you in the know based on the things we're hearing and experiencing on the ground. But at the end of the day, make sure that the legislators who are charged with working for us are doing so. And you can do that by continuing to make sure you're being heard, whether using us as an amplifying mechanism or just reaching out to directly. We're here to help.
Well, I want to thank you, the audience, for tuning in. And I want to thank Todd Belcourt for being here today. We all appreciate it. And we hope you have a good evening.